can hear me. Stephen may fiddle about if you can't. But just to say welcome, and what we're going to do over the next sort of 50 minutes or so is I'm going to talk about the excitements in the Rope Gallery, and then I'm very happy to say that Bettina von Zwehl, who has made the work which is in the Birth Gallery and scattered elsewhere through the museum, will talk about her exhibition as well. I feel it's always a bit gloomy to force people out of an exhibition where all these paintings are and force them to sit and look at slides which reveal themselves to be the miserable things that they are once you're sitting in front of them, having just been and looked at the real things. But I hope you will forgive me. This is an exhibition about which I am incredibly excited, and I hope you are too. An astonishing group of paintings that we have borrowed from, God bless her, Majesty the Queen. And she has very kindly lent us the pictures next door. About 2 years ago, I think it is, may even be slightly less, we appointed Desmond Shaw Taylor, the surveyor of the Queen's pictures, as a trustee here at the Holburne, and then moved with rather unseemly haste into asking him whether couldn't he just help us put together an exhibition from the Royal Collection. And the reason that we chose the Dutch pictures as a sort of focus for the exhibition is really about the Holburne collection as well, and Sir William's Dutch pictures downstairs, which are of course only a sort of faint echo of the glories upstairs, but nonetheless William was putting together his collection absolutely with George IV's collection of Dutch pictures in mind. And all the paintings in the exhibition, with the solitary and significant exception of this one here, were collected by George IV in the early years of the 20th century. And he really set the sort of fashionable taste of his moment. And William, of course, being the conservative he was, is a slightly old-fashioned collector by the time he's collecting in the middle years of the 19th century. But he's absolutely following the taste of the Prince Regent, later George IV. But this is the painting on the screen, which is exciting for all kinds of reasons. But one of them is that this is the first painting by Rembrandt to enter this country. It comes with the sort of courtier Sir John Kerr and one other Rembrandt, the self-portrait, which some of you may know. It's in the Walker Art Gallery in Liverpool. Rembrandt in Beret, there's a surprise. But he comes with two paintings to give to Charles I, the artist and the artist's mother. Now, whether this is the artist's mother or not is a question. If it is, this is the mother of a 23-year-old, which is quite difficult to reconcile oneself with, but, you know, life was tougher back then. What it is, though, is a fascinating... I mean, this is Rembrandt as a very young man. He's just on the eve of setting off for Amsterdam. And this is the period where he's seen as this extraordinary prodigy. There's the most exciting, I think one of the most exciting documents in the history of art is this letter written by the advisor to the stadtholder, Constantin Huygens, who goes to Leiden and finds Rembrandt and Jan Levens working side by side and writes this letter of just amazement at finding these two young men. So he talks about them still having bum fluff, not yet shaving, and creating these extraordinary paintings. And they are working side by side. There have been those, indeed, who have considered that this might actually be by Levens. But I think the consensus is that it is Rembrandt. And certainly it's Rembrandt when Charles I has given it within Rembrandt's lifetime. And it's Rembrandt's mother at that time as well. What it isn't is a portrait. I mean, it's a picture of a person, and it's a real person, and one senses that absolutely. But she's not, she's clearly in, if you like, fancy dress with this fur, which, and in front of the real thing, you can see the trick Rembrandt plays of turning his brush around and scratching into the surface of the paint with the hard tip of his brush. And there are scratches in the fur there, but with this sort of extraordinary headdress on. And maybe she's an Old Testament prophetess, or maybe she's just old age. And it's a type of painting which had a name in the Dutch 17th century. It's called a tronie. It simply means a head or a face. And it was really a painting of a characterful face, meant to convey emotion rather than of a particular named individual. Every painting in the exhibition, as it says, I think, as you go in, and you're going to hear things you've already read, if you've read anything, because I'm afraid I only got a few ideas about these paintings, and I had to write labels as well. So, but every picture is painted in Rembrandt's lifetime. So Rembrandt, born at the very beginning of the 17th century, 1606, and lives for 63 years, dies in 1669. And what is interesting, of course, is that this lifetime is also more or less the first 60 years of the Dutch Republic. In fact, the Dutch, the 7 northern provinces of the 7 united provinces of the northern Netherlands pronounced themselves independent in 1609. And although the Treaty of Munster, which brings to an end the war, essentially, between North and South, is not signed for another 40 years, so in 1648. But the Northern Netherlands are already proclaiming themselves independent in 1609. And this country, which doesn't exist as the century turns in 1600, is astonishingly, phenomenally successful. And it's an entirely new kind of country, a new kind of society that is forged in these incredibly exciting years. Amsterdam becomes the principal port of Europe, and goods and wealth flow into it. Trade, so from all over the world, things are coming into Amsterdam. It's a Protestant country. They strip the churches of all their imagery, and it is really, it's a successful and sort of mercantile and middle-class society that is forged in Holland. And it's the birth of the art market as well. And so painters have never been more numerous. Paintings have never been painted for more people. And travellers to the Netherlands, famously John Evelyn from England, goes to the Netherlands and is astonished that he goes into modest houses and there are paintings on the wall. And at that time in England, you couldn't see a painting. There were no public exhibitions. People didn't have them in most homes. You'd have to go to palaces or stately homes to see a painting. And suddenly, really, relatively modest folk, artisans, have pictures on their walls, and there are painters who spring up to essentially feed this market. What the show shows, and what is very sort of a very important strand within Dutch art of the 17th century, is this self-consciousness of this extraordinary society. And so Ruysdael, one of the great landscape painters of the age, seen by Constable, this painting, he sees it in, I'm not sure which palace, probably Carlton House, where it was in the 1620s. He sees this painting and is astonished by the sky within it. And Constable, similar flat landscape in which he grew up, is going to be impressed by the sky. Here, Ruysdael puts in the windmills that created Holland, that drained the land, to create whole new territories within Holland. And then here you can see the bleaching fields, which was this, great stretches of linen laid out in the fields around Haarlem. So this is, showing industry and wealth creation within this picture too. Similarly, the wonderful pair of boating scenes by Willem van der Velde shows, the variety of shipping that there would have been at the time, and each of these paintings has as its centre or as its principal focus the Staats yacht of the stadtholder, so the state barge. So at least suggesting the state as the ship of state surrounded by all this industry and harmony and sort of wealth creation again around it, and shipping and the navy, of course, critical to the Dutch military success and economic success. This is a fascinating little picture you will have seen, which shows this new society sort of being born to an extent. I think this is the first painting of the seaside as the seaside, the idea of the seaside, somewhere to go and enjoy for a leisured class as opposed to somewhere to work. There are workers, there are a few fishermen and people around, but they're actually outnumbered, I think, by these middle classes sort of pottering about on the seaside with their loved ones going for a little ride in a sort of charming open wagon, sitting on the dunes, having a glass of beer in a hut, and there are even people swimming in the sea as well. So now this isn't Victorian mass seasideness. That had to wait for trains and the like, but it's a new leisured class enjoying themselves. This is a rather more familiar scene, and this is Teniers. Now, Teniers actually, of course, is from the southern Netherlands, so not every painter in there, well, two of them are from the southern Netherlands, Rubens, of whom more in just a second, and Teniers. This is a fascinating picture because I think it might, there's a theory which seems to me entirely believable that this is actually painted to celebrate the peace between North and South. And we know that Teniers painted just such a scene for the Prince of Orange, the stadtholder of the northern Netherlands. This cannot be that painting because up on the wall there is a double-headed eagle shield of the Habsburgs, of the Catholic rulers of the southern Netherlands. But it's been suggested, well, we know that there was a similar scene, similar size, painted for the Prince of Orange. Might not this be the pair? So that Teniers was asked to produce two paintings to celebrate the peace. And you can't see on the slide, but you can in the picture, the date is it's 1649, so the year after the peace is on the bottom there. And the thing that convinces me that this is what it's about is what's going on outside the gate here, which is, I hope you can see this very clearly, a fight being broken up. There's one man here and one man here. He's got a knife and he's got a sword, and they're being pulled apart by their men and women folk, and a fight is being stopped, and with a church above them, which might suggest what the fight has been about in terms of the civil war. So this may be a painting absolutely about the creation of these two separate countries, what we now call Holland, but confusingly, Holland is only one of the 7 united provinces, so you can't call it Holland, and what we now call Belgium. The exhibition actually opens, of course, with this painting, and this is in a way a counterpoint to the rest of the exhibition, because this is by Rubens, of course, the great artist of the older generation. It's painted sort of within Rembrandt's lifetime, but he's just a child when it's painted. And it's absolutely, if you like, the counterpoint to what Dutch art becomes. It's Catholic, clearly. It's painted for a traditional patron rather than the open market. It's painted for... it's actually a sketch, one of two sketches that Rubens does to take to the nuns of Antwerp Cathedral as suggestions for an altarpiece. He's been asked to paint an altarpiece of the Assumption of the Virgin. So this is the Virgin, as I'm sure you know, it's not in the Bible this, but Christ ascends down bodily, so he goes up under his own steam, whereas the Virgin is assumed, she is carried up, and so bodily. So there are two bodies up there. There's Christ and there's more, isn't there? Elijah's up there as well. I can't remember. But so she is carried up by these angels who turn into clouds or are clouds, and these apostles are ranged around. This is not about the real world, whereas the paintings in the exhibition are absolutely about the real world. And the great excitement of Dutch art, and why it's been so popular, maybe particularly in this country, is this attention to the tangible, to the stuff of life, to the here and now. Religious painting is not unheard of in the northern Netherlands, but it's not being painted for churches, or very few churches. What we don't have in the exhibition is one of those beautiful Dutch paintings of the interiors of churches by Sandra and others like him, which are completely bare of imagery, whitewashed walls, all the statuary and everything pulled out, statuary pulled out. But we do have one religious painting, Dutch religious painting in the exhibition, which is the other great Rembrandt in the show. And this is Christ appearing to Mary Magdalene. And it is painted in the 1630s, in 1638. This is when Rembrandt is absolutely at the top of his game, fantastically successful. This is his golden period before the disasters of his later years. He has left Leiden, he's gone to Amsterdam, and he becomes the star of the Amsterdam art world. He's painting portraits of all and sundry, and he's painting narrative paintings, like Rubens before him. This is what, for Rembrandt, art should be about. And why narrative painting? But because what's important for Rembrandt, and we know this because he writes a letter about it's the only letter we have that survives but from Rembrandt that actually talks about what he's trying to do in his paintings. And he's writing to the stadtholder about, and the letter is essentially saying, I'm sorry I've missed another deadline, because he's been asked to paint the Passion and he's late. But he does, as an excuse, he says what he's been trying to do is capture the most real and lifelike emotion. And that is what's key to his art. And that's the only sentence we have from Rembrandt himself about what he's trying to do. And if you look at his religious and narrative paintings in the 1630s, they're all about emotion, moments of emotional crisis and extremes. And remember, he's choosing these moments, with the exception of the Passion scenes painted commission for the stadtholder. He's deciding what to paint, and he's painting Belshazzar's Feast, a painting of terror, all about terror. He's painting Samson getting angry with his father-in-law, a painting about anger. Who's the most angry person ever? It must be Samson getting angry with it, because he then goes away and slaughters lots of people. So who's the most terrified person? Who's the most angry person? And so on. And you can, there's the blinding of Samson, sort of agony. And then there's this, which is far less overblown than many of the paintings I've talked about. But here, it's about a shift in emotion. It's a shift from misery and Mary Magdalene's come, it's Easter morning, she's come to the tomb and Jesus isn't there, the body's not there. She's come to anoint the body and it's not there. She does find two angels in there, but she is desperate. Someone's taken the body away. And the gardener passes and she says, where have you taken him? And of course the gardener then says, Mary, and she recognises that this is actually Christ risen. And so this is this moment of realisation and recognition and shift from misery to extraordinary wonder. And how does Rembrandt do that shift? Well, he uses light, of course. Her head's completely, and actually the picture too, more evident in front of it than here, is sort of split between light and dark, and she's turning towards the light, and there's this beautiful tall light in the distance, with the temple looking rather like Durham Cathedral, catching the light. I must race on through some extraordinary highlights. This is the picture we've used as our poster, and it's out there on the front desk, and then you see it, and it's amazing. It is the most astonishingly beautiful little thing by Herrick Dow, who is another painter from Leiden, like Rembrandt and Jan Levens. Have you been to Leiden? Tiny little place. And these geniuses all emerge there within a few years of each other. And actually Dow works with Rembrandt, and Rembrandt is at the sort of beginning of these two completely diametrically opposed types of painting. This what became known as fine painting, the thin Schilders of Leiden, who paint in this extraordinary miniaturist technique, where the idea is you simply cannot see how it's made. And then, of course, Rembrandt goes on to be the progenitor in the Netherlands of rough painting, where it's all about paint and this extraordinary, using paint almost like sculpture. But this is a wonderful, gorgeous little thing that may or may not be all about sex. But actually, I think you're missing the point if that... I'm not sure it is. I think art historians and Dutch paintings, there's a bit of a problem with art historians and Dutch paintings. There are these things called emblem books. I don't know whether you've come across them, these Dutch emblem books, which rely on this idea of looking at the world that everything, more or less, can be seen as a symbol of something else. So that if you... and so it opens a possibility that when you look at a real life scene, although it's clearly not that real life, everything might be symbolic. And usually those symbols are either about virtue or the opposite. And art historians with filthy minds go around looking at paintings like these and saying, oh, pestles and mortars, oh, wow. Candles, onions. Well, they were considered to be aphrodisiac. I don't think there's a single foodstuff ever that hasn't at some point been considered to be an aphrodisiac. But anyway, take it or leave it. This, again, now I'm just showing you, in case you haven't already seen, and you have. So just one of the most beautiful and sort of unexpected Dutch landscapes. This is by Jan van der Heyden, who is most famous for his wonderful cityscapes, sort of with canals and this very characteristic, you can't see it here, but in the painting, sort of brickwork in which every brick is shown and mortar is dribbling. You can see all the mortar repairs and so on. And this is him out in the country, and showing a sort of, a busy waterway, a grand house, but it's not really a painting about the grand house. In fact, the facade of the grand house you can only just glimpse. If you do look at it, you can see it's got little pilasters, but you can't see it. It's not showing its best face. And then this is a farmhouse here with a hayrick behind it, and apparently that is how outside in the sort of suburbs of Amsterdam, along the rivers, it's how estates were managed. So you would have, big country house, farmhouse. Desmond Shaw Taylor, who the surveyor of the Queen's Pictures, this is one of his favourite paintings, and in the actually maybe we had to cut it from his narrative in the sound guide, but he makes the point that the next time you come across this kind of landscape in which there's no real focus, that you're outside the city and along a river in which various things are happening, but it's not, the painting isn't about that, in which there's this astonishing sort of attention to the nuances of light, that you don't really get landscapes like this again until the Impressionists outside Paris, at Argenteuil or wherever they may be, sort of painting slices of life as happened upon. It's a surprise to me that the Royal Collection isn't stuffed with Dutch still lives. It isn't, but this is, again, one of, a glorious example of the so-called breakfast piece. These rather sombre, spare still lives by, in this case, Willem Thijs Heder, made up of, few elements, but with this extraordinary sort of clarity of arrangement. But slightly unsettling as well here, that all very calm, but everything sort of slightly toppled and half-eaten, and you just want to do that, and some child is going to knock it off before the end of the exhibition, I imagine. I don't know what to say anymore. Another glorious thing. This is De Hoek this is in Delft. And this is this moment where De Hoek and Vermeer are inventing another kind of painting. And at this moment, the general view is that De Hoek is making the running, if you like. But it's a painting about, a kind of painting about light, about these sort of glimpsed views, almost subjectless. It's not subjectless. There's this card-playing group going on, but if you imagine Jan Steen doing a bunch of card players, and men surrounding a woman playing cards, you can imagine all the goings-on there might be. And yet here, everything is sort of incidental to the light that is enveloping this scene, with just the most astonishing sensitivity to the way that inside the door is painted and the pavement as well. A wonderful, wonderful thing. I was going to talk about symbolism then, but I'm going to move on, actually, because I've got to stop soon. One final thing about about the exhibition and the Holburne. I'm a bit worried about the exhibition and the Holburne because we have said, or I have said on occasion, that we have the finest collection of Dutch pictures in the West Country. Well, not anymore, we don't. Or rather we do, but they're upstairs rather than downstairs. But there were some choices within the exhibition there which were made deliberately to echo upstairs and downstairs, including the two little Italianate Dutch landscapes to the right of the Ruysdael. So this, the Carole du Jardin, which is a beautiful little sunlit thing, and similar in some ways to our little du Jardin as well, downstairs. Nicholas Berkham, again, an artist who we don't know whether he went to Italy, but he, well, I think he probably did, looking at this. Our Berkham, of course, is a very different thing and painted before, if he did go to Italy, before he went to Italy, and certainly before he became sort of caught up with the Italianate style of painting. And then the wonderful Ostada. I have to say, Ostada is not an artist to whom I normally warm, but I do love this picture. There's something about his sort of peasant faces that I simply can't be doing with. And then this is a side of ours taken before it was cleaned. But again, an artist who is fantastically popular in the 19th century in this country, both with George IV, but also obviously Holborn's example downstairs as well. And then the exhibition ends with this very curious picture by Metsu. Metsu, who paints the ridiculous picture of this painting here, which just makes me laugh. I mean, it is funny, and I'm sure it's meant to be funny, but particularly this sort of sinking look here. Oh, you're so gorgeous, come and make music with me. And this sort of lapdog here, dressed in the same clothes. I mean, so with the red bow around his neck and the white collar and clearly, and the little white cuffs the dog's got as well. And she's wafting down the stairs, and this hopeless sort of, sorry, jilted lover up there. But that's the kind of painting Metsu is normally painting. And yet, this is the only self-portrait we have of him. And he seems to be saying he's something very different, and actually something that the rest of the exhibition isn't. I mean, this is more Rubens than anything else. It's actually saying it's a follower of Rubens. This is classical busts. I mean, and he's dressed as if he's a Renaissance painter. So he's claiming, that his art is coming from the classical and the heroic, and of course that's not what his art was. It was about the real world and about looking. And maybe there's something, I don't know, in the way he's looking out at us that actually suggests as much. But it's a curious, if nonetheless fascinating thing. Anyway, it's very exciting, it's all here. I don't know, have any of you tried the sound guide, the audio guide? I mean, that's quite jolly too. I particularly liked talking to the naval man about boats, who saw all kinds of things that I hadn't seen. He went on for hours, so you've only got, there's only an edited version of the audio guide. But we've got Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall talking about onions, and the Bishop of Salisbury talking about Mary Magdalene, and so there's a nice mix, I hope. Oh, and Maggie Hanley actually is wonderful about the Rembrandt, the painter Maggie Hanley. So there's one artist talking next door, and quite a lot of people who, well, have some areas of expertise. But anyway, now it's time to hear from another artist. We don't often have living artists, actually more often than we used to anyway, but we obviously normally deal with the dead ones. But I'm very happy to say we've got a real live artist in the building, and Bettina von Zwehl, who has made the wonderful things next door, and if I just do that and that, she can tell you about what she's been up to. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Can I put this on?
Yeah.
Would you mind to put this onto your pants?
Bear with. Here.
Yeah, that's gonna be perfect.
This.
And then just and we switch it on. And I just
Okay. Hello. I'm the live artist. Returning from the grave. No. This is my name is Bettina, and I'm going to talk only briefly about my humble little exhibition in the Worth Gallery and the pieces I've scattered around the galleries. Before I do so, I should tell you a few words about myself. I was born in Munich in 1971, and I escaped Germany when I was about 20, went to Italy, and then I got seduced by Renaissance art and sort of I very quickly understood that I wouldn't become a painter because my mum is a painter, but I haven't got the patience and the skills. So my passion turned towards photography very quickly, and then a few years later moved to London and studied photography there at the Royal College of Art and the London College of Communications. And ever since then I've been doing my own work and teaching, and I do commissions And so yeah, and now I'm here, and I should probably not tell you everything about my life, but previously in my life, I was an artist in residence at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London in 2011, and that was probably the best thing that ever happened in my career. I was there for 6 months. I had my own studio, which felt like the size of a football field at the time. And I had access to all the fabulous curators and members of staff. And I spent a lot of time studying the miniature collection in the V&A, and I made a body of work in response to the miniature collection there, and actually photographed invigilator lady over the duration of my residency. So I photographed the same person for 6 months, and we did 34 photo sessions by the same window, and that became an installation, which will be on display next year in the V&A. But after that residency, Katie Barron, who's the curator of my little exhibition, she introduced me to the Holburne Museum and the lovely people here, and then I was invited to make a body of work in response to the Holburne collection. And this is where I arrive at this picture. So I had a day in Bath, actually a few hours at the Holburne Museum, and very, very quickly I discovered this unique, outstanding eye miniature of a family of eyes by an unknown artist, which is actually on loan only, it's not even yours. You should buy it. But yeah, so I discovered that and fell in love with it, and it was pure fascination actually. I couldn't actually say I fell in love with it, I just thought, this is so fascinating. 5 eyes, and every eye is probably smaller than a centimeter and square, and so little information and so much power, and these 5 gazes squashed in an oval, and why, and all these questions popped into my head. And so I just went home and wrote a little proposal and said, this is it, I'm going to make a body of work based on this piece. And then I ventured out, and I'm going to try to hit the right button now. Yeah, and then I thought, okay, so what do I do first? And then I realized I had really never photographed eyes on their own, because my background is portraiture, and everything I've ever done is a whole person, or even at least sort of head and shoulders. And so to only photograph an eye seemed really strange and unfamiliar, and also all the questions that it brings up. You know, is this still a portrait, or is this the end of portraiture, or the beginning, or is this a symbol, or is it actually a sort of, is it a gaze, the portrait of a gaze maybe? Anyway, I went out to photograph a primary school, and I photographed all the children in my daughter's primary school as a sort of research and development stage, and I had to do it really quickly because I was not given a lot of time with each child, and sort of I wrapped it into a school project. So we also got all the children to draw their eye and then photographed their eyes. And after I had photographed about 200 children, I realized actually now I understand what's happening with the eye portraits. They're not just pictures of eyes; they're actually portraits. They're proper portraits, except it's only the eye. So what I mean is, at the beginning I was only looking at the child, photographing the eye, and then halfway through I understood I have to actually look at the whole child while I'm doing the eye portrait. So what I'm saying is it's really important how the child sits, what angle the eye is at, the expression of the whole face, everything, the whole body has an impact on the expression of the eye, which is probably obvious to all of you, but it wasn't obvious to me. So that was helpful. But then I still wasn't satisfied at the end of it all, and I sort of thought, all these eyes side by side, they just sort of seem to cancel each other out, and they sort of disappear in the surreal rather than in and the sort of delicate, personal of the original eye miniatures. So I then fell into a deep crisis, actually. No idea. Because I had no idea how I'm ever going to make this work in the Worth Gallery. And so I thought that these eyes cannot go in the Worth Gallery. They can't be all together in one room. It's not going to work. And then I started again, and I thought, why is this interesting to me? Why do I want? What's so amazing about eye miniatures? And the amazing thing about them is that they're hugely personal. They were exchanged between lovers. They were highly personal gifts. They were kept secretly, worn under the clothes, close to the heart. There was lots of dramatic stories about eye miniatures. There's only about 1,000 in the world that are originals. All the others are fakes. So I sort of returned to the original object, and I realized that it has to be personal. I can't just photograph school children. It has to be about people that mean something to me. So I thought I might work about my family, and because I'm in London, my family is only my daughter and my husband, because everyone else is abroad. So I thought, okay, and then I will use these two people. It's a small room after all. And then I had this picture, which I actually made in the V&A, and and it's the only picture with a narrative I've ever made, I think. And I made this last year, and it's called Ruby with Diamond. And people might ask you why diamond? Where's the diamond? And the diamond is in the box. And what I wanted to do at the time, I wanted to photograph Ruby holding a box, and to give the box some weight, I left this huge diamond in the box, which the box came with a diamond. But I actually just wanted the box. I didn't want the diamond. But the box didn't come without the diamond. So therefore I left the diamond in the picture, in the box. So it's a bit like Le Petit Prince, this story or do you know it? The Little Prince? It's like, draw me a sheep, and then he draws a box and says, and the prince says, but where is the sheep? And it's in the box. So it's a bit like this. The picture is a bit of a play on this beautiful story. So what is in her box, we don't know. Maybe it's a ring, maybe it's a necklace, maybe it's objects that she loves, maybe Playmobil, I don't know. And then I understood that I need to make it more personal, I need to return to the jewel, because eye miniatures famously were incorporated in lockets and jewels and pearls and diamonds, rubies, anything you name it. They were precious, they were sort of very precious objects. And very, very tiny, sort of thumbnail size. So I then went out to find a jewellery designer who I had an affinity with, and that was Laura Lee. So she has a workshop in Hutton Garden, and she has a shop in Mummer Street actually. And her jewellery is she's got an interest in. She used to work at the V&A. She has an interest in sort of antiques, and anyway, so we kind of really hit it off together. And she was like all sparks and everything about jewellery and making an eye miniature, luckily. And so I made the eye portrait of Ruby, and then she made the frame, which is made with old cut diamonds, 34 old cut diamonds, and the inner circle is rose gold, and then there's a white gold chain. And that took about 4 months. So the time was ticking. And I wanted to make two pieces. So I wanted to have a necklace of my child and then a ring of my husband. So again, this is reviving a tradition. This is not something I've invented. This is something that was very fashionable at the late 18th century, but only for about 30, 40 years, and then it completely disappeared. So it's a really sort of overlooked, tiny little niche art form that I'm reviving with photography and the help of a very skilled jewellery designer. And this is quite a very heavy ring with thick back, and I don't know all the terminology of jewellery, but yeah, you probably know more than me. But yeah, so it's the idea of the eye is always there, it's always watching you, it's looking out for you, it's looking after you, and it's controlling you as well. So it's got a lot of double meanings, this eye miniature. And then finally, in the Worth Gallery, this looks a bit pixelated now. So you have to look at the actual objects. But so I have the father-daughter relationship in the vitrine, and then there's the mother-daughter relationship on the wall, if you want. But this is a very literal interpretation. It sort of hopefully transcends that. But that's a self-portrait and then a portrait of Ruby in the V&A. So it sort of reflects the space in the relationship, but also the sort of, I don't know, the mother looking towards the child, and the child looking out to the viewer. Yeah, that's it really. That's all I have to say for now. Do you have any questions? Yeah.
I just wondered, you were talking about, talked a lot about eyes, and I wondered whether you looked at women wearing niqab and how you can only identify that person from their eyes.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it's been a thought. Also, because I have some Arab friends and they brought it up as a sub. But it's actually, I think it's an empowering of the gaze to be invisible to the public and to see the public and they can't see you. You know, often we think, oh, these poor women, they're all wrapped up and they can't sort of show their beautiful clothes. But actually, they can see. They feel more empowered because they can see us and we can't see them. And it's a bit with the eye miniatures. It's like they're looking at us. We can't escape this gaze. It's like they're looking at us, and yeah, it's like this sort of unescapable gaze when it's directed at the viewer. Any other questions?
No? Thank you, Bettina, that was wonderful, thank you. I hope you've seen, I mean, as you wander around, you will be surprised by these, and that, I'm right, that's Ruby again. So Ruby has a gold frame, but elsewhere in the museum there are some of her classmates. Anyway, lovely to see you all here. Do enjoy the show, spread the word, and